So at the age of 17, I was excluded from a community I had been part of my entire life, and a community that I had learned to define me because of one decision. The looks I received reflected shame, hatred, at times compassion, and even disappointment. I could read the looks and hear the whispers, and they all said one word: slut. This word branded me. This word became my scarlet letter. Humiliation is defined by making someone feel ashamed, by injuring their dignity and their self-respect in a public environment. Humiliation is an emotion felt by every single person, no matter their race, their status, their culture, or their gender. At the time, during the first few months, I was devastated, and I lost my sense of self. I felt naked, exposed, and utterly alone. There were times that I would lay on my bedroom floor and cry for hours at a time. And I remember that for the first time in my entire life, my mother didn't know what to say or what to do to help me. So she did the only thing she could do, just be there to give me the assurance that I needed, that no matter how alone I felt, she was there. As the time passed, I began to ask myself, how can I become the person I liked again? I found that empowerment through self-compassion. In her journal, Kristen Neff, an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, posits that 3 key components that make up self-compassion. Self-compassion is an important virtue for an individual to develop. The first component is self-kindness. Self-kindness is defined as feeling mercy for your own mistakes. It's learning to forgive ourselves when we make a mistake. Humans tend to exaggerate their failures and criticize themselves more harshly when they commit a mistake versus when someone else commits the same mistake. As a result, the second component is common humanity, which involves eliminating the mentality that only the individual fails, because in reality, we all fail at one point or another in our lives. The third component is mindfulness. Mindfulness is accepting personal imperfections and knowing your limitations and taking into consideration that everybody has their own flaws. For example, if you're good at English, but not math, you can't compare yourself or your math skills with someone who's great at math, because that would make you feel like a failure, when in reality, it's just that you're better in another field. You have to consider all the factors and all the circumstances before considering yourself a failure in comparison to someone else. Developing these 3 components of self-compassion has shown to be immensely beneficial, as mentioned by Professor Neff in her journal, who stated that people with self-compassion not only have higher levels of life satisfaction, emotional intelligence, they also have less self-criticism, lower levels of depression, anxiety, and fear of failure. During my first few months, while I was going through all of this, I read a novel called The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, as a class assignment, of course. The protagonist, her name is Hester Prynne, and she is excluded from her Puritan community and forced to wear an A on her chest for adultery. Hester turns her scarlet letter into something beautiful and empowering versus humiliating and downgrading as it was supposed to be. This helped me view my circumstances in a whole new perspective. Hester didn't let her scarlet letter define who she was. She stayed true to who she was, no matter what the whole world was telling her she was. With her actions, she proved the Puritan community wrong and changed how people saw her. Realizing this was the biggest epiphany ever. My label didn't have to define me. It didn't have to tell me who I was. I knew that I wasn't what people said I was. They only saw my mistakes, my imperfections, my limitations. They couldn't see the person I truly was. Like Hester, I decided to change that through my actions. I learned to stand with my head held high. I learned to not feel ashamed of my mistakes. I learned because they had made me the person I am today, standing here talking to you guys. I had grown more in the past few months than I had grown in the past 3 years. I began to see the importance of learning to empower ourselves through shaming. This allowed me to understand the scarlet letter that exists in our 21st century. I learned that my shame led to my eventual empowerment. 8 months ago, I began working with 5 individuals and assisting them in developing self-compassion through various activities, of course. I will be discussing 2 of the activities that I felt had the most significant effect overall. The first one is called the box activity. During the box activity, each individual wrote labels and harsh words people have called them on all sides of the boxes. Afterwards, they were given a bat and told to destroy each box. And these are some examples of what they put on their boxes. Besides being a great stress reliever, it also helped them understand that labels, they're just what you see on the screen, words on a box. They don't have to define us. They don't have to define you. We have to learn to think twice before we call another individual something, because it's essential. Because sometimes the measurement of our words is hard to see, and they can't hurt even if it's just playing around. However, if we find ourselves being the victims of such labels, remember that we do have the power to let them define us or to destroy them, just like they did with these boxes, and make your own definitions. This idea was what led into the next activity called the Scarlet Letter activity. Each one of them had to choose a letter from one of the words or labels they have chosen or called and transform it into a word that describes a positive virtue that they have that starts with the same letter. For example, my letter is an S, and it stands for slut. But I've transformed it, and and now I define it as strong, because that's what I've gotten out of this experience. These are some of the examples that they have chosen. These are the letters that they chose. These are only 4 out of the 5. So now I ask you, what's your scarlet letter? Thank you for listening.